Welcome to this product demonstration on Extender, a cost-effective way to configure, customize, and extend Sage 300. My name's Anne from Orchid Systems. Extender facilitates both configuration and customization for Sage 300. You can configure alerts via an email or creating an information manager note, logging, when and by whom records or fields are inserted or changed, workflow to augment your business processes and provide more visibility and accountability to your business processes, and the ability to call external processes normally needed for integration. And by configuration, I mean it is point and click, a selection of options, no coding, no Python. Please see our website www.orchid.systems for a product demonstration on the features of configuration using Extender. In this video, I'm going to run through the benefits of using Extender for your customization of Sage 300. The customizations are done using Python, a very widely used open source programming language. With Python and Extender, you can customize the business logic to add validations, default values, or automate processes. You can also customize the workflow that is provided by Extender configuration, and you can have your own custom workflow actions if required. You can customize existing Sage 300 screens. These are screens provided by the core modules and third parties developed using the SDK. And to these screens, you can add new or amended fields, add new buttons, and automate processes. You can create new screens as part of your own customizations or applications and the associated business logic that is required for the new screens. You can create new tables and the associated business logic with those tables, and you can integrate directly to other Sage 300 companies or other systems on-premise or indeed cloud systems. And with your customizations, you can also use other Orchid modules to extend the functionality of your Sage 300 system. For time-based alerts and workflows that you've written using Extender, you can use Process Scheduler to schedule them, for example, at midnight. And for sharing information across systems, maybe to display information in Company 1 coming from Sage Company number 2, or to display information in your Sage 300 company that's coming from a website or another system. And you can do this using Orchid Notes. Extender can also generate documents and file them away in the appropriate place to be displayed by Document Management link. And this video is going to cover off customizing Sage 300 using Extender and have a look at Extender working with other Orchid modules. We're now going to look at what you can do with customizing or developing with Extender. The first thing you can do is apply additional validations to the business logic in Sage 300. And this can be the core business logic, for example, accounts receivable, or any third-party business logic if the module has been created in the SDK. Some examples of this are custom security. Only Anne can amend the credit limit up to $20,000, where other users can only amend the credit limit up to $10,000. You can also validate values that can't be blank. For example, the account group on the general ledger accounts, you could validate that it's not blank. Or you could validate it is not blank and one of a specific value. For example, the territory code on the customer needs to be one of AA, BB, CC, DD. You could also validate the postcodes or states or countries that are being entered on the addresses. You could also apply custom validations, which calls an external web service to validate that the address that you've entered on the order entry shipped to is a valid address for that country. I'm first going to show you a validation of the Sage 300 business logic around AR customers. Customer 1105's credit limit is currently $9,000, and I'm logged in as Anne. And if I attempt to change the credit limit to $30,000, I get an error message saying the maximum credit limit is $20,000. So Anne can only set the credit limit up to $20,000. Other users can only set the credit limit up to $10,000. And this is achieved by applying a script to the AR0024 business logic view, and this logic is executed whenever the customer is accessed, be it via the web client or via an import-export or via this particular VB screen. The other validation we have on here is on the territory code. The current territory is set at CA, and I have a note telling me the valid territory codes. If I try and change this territory code to XX and save, I'll get the error message saying XX is not a valid value for the territory code. Another example of a validation is on Orchid's EFT vendors. So this is a third-party module developed in the SDK. If you are paying vendors using the NACHA standards, you need to specify the transaction code, which indicates what type of account that the vendor has. 22 for a checking account and 32 for a savings account. And if you don't have 22 or 32, the payment would be rejected. So using Extender and a custom script, we can validate that the only entry that is allowed in this field is 22 or 32. It won't allow XX, it won't allow blank, but it will allow 22 or 32. These additional validations are achieved by applying a Python script, a customized Python script, to the associated Sage 300 view. The one we're looking at here is the EFT vendor view, and we've applied the custom script validate field and set the parameters to say validate the payref field to values of 32 and 22. The other example we saw was the custom script applied to the AR customer. The first one validated the credit limit was less than $20,000 if the user was AN, and the validate field script was validating the territory code being one of these values here, including blank. We saw two examples of applying custom scripts, one to a customer view, a core Sage 300 view, and one to a third-party view developed in the SDK to the EFT vendor. But you could apply any script to any Sage 300 core view or any Sage 300 third-party view developed in the SDK. The second type of development or customization you can do using Extender is conditional alerting. So using the configurator, we could send an email or create a note whenever the customer record was changed, for example. But you can't send that conditionally. To say, for example, only send the email if Anne is the user who does the change, or if the credit limit is more than $10,000, only then send the email. So using your own custom scripts and development, you can send conditional emails, you can create conditional notes, or you might only want to start a workflow for sales orders when there's insufficient stock to meet the sales order on all the lines, as opposed to just checking one field on the header as we did with our retail sales orders. Another type of conditional alerting you could have is give the user an error message or a warning message when they enter a sales order detail line where the margin would be less than 10% on that particular item. In this example, we have a custom script applied to the sales order detail, which validates that the margin is more than a parameter value, and in my case, it's more than 10%. So if I change the unit price to something that means that validation is no longer going to be valid, when I step off the line, I get a message saying that this 50% minus 50% margin doesn't exceed my 10% threshold. We've just seen an example of giving a conditional alert at the time of data entry. So when the margin was less than 10%, the operator got a warning. We can also automate business processes, either create transactions, for example, to auto-assemble bill of material items or automatically add a freight charge to sales orders, or if a certain type of item is put on a sales order, automatically add a deposit item for those items. We can set default values like auto-numbering for orders and lots by location, or adding a price list when a customer is created, or a territory based on the state the customer's in. We can automate integration processes. For example, whenever a shipment is created, we can create the CSV file for the third-party logistics warehouse. Or we could FTP that file to the third-party logistics warehouse. And we can provide enhanced intermodule integration. For example, if you're using project and job costing and you want different or additional information to go to the AR invoice or the GL batch, which is created from the AR invoice, you can use Extender to change that information. One example of showing how Extender can default values is, for example, when you're entering AR invoices. AR item invoices can have optional fields at the detail level, but they cannot be defaulted based on the item. But using Extender and a custom table, which I'll show you later, and a script to do the defaulting, when you add an item to the AR item invoice, if the item has been defined to have optional fields, predefined optional fields, then it will be defaulted. And in our case, we're defaulting the color to red and the size to 15 centimeters. And if I add a different item to the AR invoice, we can see the optional fields. The color has been defaulted to green and the size to medium. And I will show you later in this presentation how we can create a table and a screen to capture that information. And using a screen script, which I'll also show you another example of later around accounts payable, we can customize the screen to put the optional fields in the grid as opposed to only editing them through the detail zoom. So we've now seen one example of automating a business process using Extender, where we defaulted the AR item optional fields to the AR invoice. Using custom scripts, you can customize the existing Sage 300 core screens or third-party module screens if they've been developed in the SDK. For example, you could add buttons to these screens for custom functionality. On the purchase order screen, you could add a button to auto print and email the document to the vendor. On the OE order entry screen, you could add a button to auto display stock levels from another company. On the OE invoice screen, you could add a button to auto create the PDF and email it to the customer. Or on the order entry screen, you could add a button to split the order into multiple orders, the lines being grouped by expected ship date and location for EDI. In this example, we've added two buttons to the purchase order entry screen. One to create a PDF of the current purchase order and save it away in the folder for the vendor, and a second one to create a PDF and save it away for the vendor, as well as email it to the vendor. And when we refresh our alert box, we see the document that was created and emailed to the vendor. Similarly, we can add similar buttons to print and email sales order confirmations to the customer, and we can add buttons to, for example, add a freight line to the sales order. We can also add existing fields or new fields to a screen. For example, in AR invoice entry or AP invoice entry, you have optional fields on the detail line, but in order to access them, you need to click the account tax button and then the optional field button. But using Extender, you could put the optional fields that you want in the actual grid for the AP invoice entry or the GL journal entry so that they're visible at the same time as you're entering the data. You can add custom fields to screens. For example, you might need additional fields on your IC item for the marketing or the website. And you can add new fields to screens. You might also need to hide or show or relabel existing fields based on the user or based on the item they select. Or you might need to validate a item optional field only if it's in a certain category. So all this logic can be added to the screens using Python scripts. For my AP invoice entry, I have elected to show the entity and the project optional field in the grid, so they can select and change the entity or key in a project in the grid of the AP invoice entry screen. This is not a new field, it's the existing optional field that you would normally click on Account and Tax and then zoom into the optional field to access it. So whether you change the values here and for project here or in the grid, it's updating the same data value. And you can do a similar thing for any grid. Here's an example of having that same entity optional field active on the GL batch journal to enable you to enter the optional field in the grid as opposed to clicking on the up arrow to get that appropriate optional field. You can also create new screens for your applications to add custom finders or to support custom business processes like a quick order entry or a quick purchase order receipt entry. Or you could have a custom purchase order or sales order functionality allowing you to create purchase orders from sales orders but applying your own particular logic at that time. You could have custom import screens to import a CSV file into multiple tables at the same time, or a custom screen for a new custom table that you're working with. And here's an example of a custom screen which I've added to the Sage 300 desktop for all users in the AR setup area to maintain the optional fields per AR item. And here we can select or display an AR item, select the optional field and define a default value. So for the BK360, for the color optional field, the default value is red. And for the BK360, the size optional field is going to default to 15. And this custom screen was created using Python and an extender script and added to the Sage 300 desktop where you selected it to be added. And you can also create your own custom actions to make more advanced workflows. So in the configurator edition, you can choose from a subset of 30 or so workflow actions that get installed with the product, but if you need your own custom action, that can be developed in Python and used as part of your workflow. For example, you might want to automate the assembly or disassembly on approval of an assembly document. You might have custom actions for your own custom validations. For example, when checking the credit limits for a sales order, you may want to check if there has ever been a return check from the customer, and if there has, put the sales order on hold. You might also want to use the workflow status in your own custom business processes. For example, only allow the EFT file to be created if somebody has approved the creation of that file. Custom actions can also support integration with other systems, for example, collaboration tools. You might have a business process that when you post a sales order, that you post that sale into your MS Teams or your Twilio or Twitter to distribute that information to your team. For workflow, you create your workflow templates to control the actions that you want to take. A workflow can have as many user-defined steps as you need, and per step you can have as many actions as you want, and some steps might have no actions in themselves but are a progress to step. So for example, if we were in the wait new step, the next steps would be approve and reject, and these are the buttons that you see on your workflow console. With Configurator, you are able to use these 30 predefined actions in your workflows. But if you need your own custom actions, you can add custom actions which contain the word workflow, and then they can be used in your workflow in the same way as you can the configurator actions. And the one I'm going to demonstrate to you is this Teams workflow action, which is a custom action to post any sales order that is created and put on hold into Teams for the team to take note and go and approve the order if appropriate. And I'm now going to demonstrate creating a new order using this workflow template, which will check if the user is the web store user, then put the order on hold and post a note through to the Teams website to alert people that the order needs to be taken off hold. When a new order is created with their web store being the user, a workflow is automatically started, the order is put on hold, and the message is sent through to Teams. Using Extender, you can also create your own Sage 300 views. So this is the table and the associated business logic. Example for this could be sell-through data, customers' net promoter scores, user-specific departments, or the table that I demonstrated already, the AR item default optional field values. You could have additional fields for IC items needed for marketing or website details. You might need tables to store salespeople KPIs, or the sales regions, the sales areas, and the salespeople hierarchy. Per Sage 300 company, you can create as many tables as you need. And when you're creating a table, you can have as many fields as you need, and your data types must be the data types that the Sage 300 SDK supports. And then when you go create, Extender adds this table to the Sage 300 company database, and Extender adds this table into the Sage 300 dictionary so that all the customization utilities and reporting utilities will see this custom table as if it was one of Sage 300 core tables. And you get a default table editor to add, modify, delete, and import records into your table. But if the default rules are not sufficient, you can then create your own custom table in Extender and have any validations that you need. And as we saw earlier, we had a table where you could enter the AR item description displayed, and then you select the optional field description displayed, and then you entered the default optional field value. And either using the Extender custom tables screen to maintain your data in your own custom table, or using the custom table editor, you are able to default the values of lookup tables, for example, the AR item description and the optional field description, but you do need to select your table first. And that may be a reason why you want to write your own custom table screen, which is linked to your own custom table, still has the ability to default the item description and the optional field value, and then you can apply your own custom logic in here as well, and also add it to your desktop as a screen to edit just one table only. You may also want tables to store your configuration parameters, as opposed to hard coding them in your customizations in the Python script. You might need something, for example, a workflow departmental hierarchy with the individual departmental limits and personal spending limits and the delegation of authority limits within your departments. The benefits of using Extender to do your customizations normally results in a more cost-effective development for Sage 300. You're using Python, which is a scripted language. The source code is available and visible on site, and no compiler is needed to make changes. The source code is imported into the company database, and therefore it is backed up and upgraded with the appropriate company. Your custom tables and associated views are stored in the Sage 300 company database and support all the Sage 300 tools, like upgrading with Extender, dumping and loading if you're using that to back up your database, all the reporting tools that work with the Sage 300 companies, and your customizations, your custom views, are available as a core view for other developers. Using Python, we can leverage the existing open source libraries. For example, integration with cloud-based systems. There's many libraries to consume web services that are on the cloud. And Python was voted the most popular programming language in 2019. All your custom scripts are imported into the Sage 300 company database. So these are the scripts to add buttons to screens, to create new screens, to apply additional validations or apply additional business processes to your Sage 300 company. And these Python scripts are text files that are imported into the database. And it's these scripts that are run when activated by Extender. So this means that your customizations belong to the company. They are imported into the company database. They are therefore backed up when the company database is backed up. And when the company database is upgraded, your customizations upgrade at the same time. Extender can be used with Process Scheduler to get time-based alerts. For example, customers who are overdue, low stock levels, or overdue stock receipts and shipments. You can also schedule custom workflows to start or progress a workflow. For example, a workflow to follow up with overdue customers, or a workflow to create and progress a stock requisition. It can also schedule business process automations like creating and emailing PDF documents to customers, daily sales to management, and these documents can be filed away for Document Management Link for easy access later. And it can schedule scripts for integrations like importing sales orders or exporting daily sales for other external reporting systems. This is an example of a process schedule with two steps. The first step runs a script to check if there's any stock that is below the minimum level in a location and sends the warehouse manager an email with all the items on one email. And this is a second script which runs the AR aging for each customers and sends the sales rep an email showing which customers are overdue or out of terms. And this type of schedule would normally be scheduled to run at midnight, but you can run it right now. And here's an example of the email that's sent to the sales rep showing customer 7,400 is overdue, and the email to the warehouse manager showing all the items that are less than the minimum stock. And by clicking on the email hot link using Email Smart Link, you can drill down into the underlying location detail screen for the appropriate item. We have just seen two examples of a time-based alert using Process Scheduler and Extender and Email Smart Link. You can also use Extender with Information Manager notes for enhanced audit and logging or conditional notes. For example, you may only want to show the note if the customer is over the credit limit, or you may only want to maintain the note if the customer is over the credit limit. You can also create on-the-fly notes. For example, you might want to show year-to-date sales per customer and item at the time of entering the order entry. You can also include functionality in your notes, like drill down to the underlying transactions on the order entry screen, or drill down to the outstanding transactions in accounts receivable. You can also use notes to display information from other Sage 300 company databases, for example, stock levels or accounts receivable balances for customers that purchase from two companies, or indeed show information from external cloud systems, for example, exchange rates or freight charges. We have configured extended notes around the sales order shipment screen. In the first box, we see a list of the back orders. So these are orders which are not yet complete for customer 1580. In the second box, we see the outstanding balance for this customer aged into the different aging buckets. And if we double-click on any of these blue entries, which are hyperlinks, it will open up the transactions that make up that particular bucket. So now we're seeing the transactions that make up the over 90 days bucket. And we can click on the order entry hyperlink too, and it'll open up the sales order entry screen for that particular order. And in the top box, we can see another example of an extended note, which is showing us the year-to-date sales for customer 1520. And finally, to gain access to the workflow console, the workflow icons on Sage 300 screens, or to access Email SmartLink, you need to have an Orchid user. And Email SmartLink can be used in your workflow emails. We have seen a few examples of customizing Sage 300. Let's take a look how this works under the hood. When you consider the Sage 300 architecture, in the center you have the database, the Sage 300 company database. Surrounding that, you have the business logic or views, which encapsulate the business processes and business rules. These views are both the Sage 300 core views and the third-party developers views that have been developed in the Sage 300 SDK, or Software Development Kit. In the three segments surrounding the views, you have the ways that the business logic can be accessed. Firstly, by using the desktop or classic screens. These are the Sage 300 Visual Basic screens for all their modules, like General Ledger, Accounts Receivable, Accounts Payable, Inventory Control, etc., plus the third-party developers whose modules have been created in the Sage 300 SDK, like EFT processing and RMA processing. Secondly, you have the utilities provided by Sage and third-party developers to access the business logic using the SDK. The global import-export routines, the VBA macros, the APIs, and web services. And finally, more recently, you now have the web screens, both the Sage 300 web screens and those third parties who have started releasing their web screens. What Extender allows you to do is, firstly, by configuration, have alerting and logging, workflow, and the ability to create events to trigger the calling of externally developed programs sitting as a layer on top of the views. So it sits on top of both the Sage 300 core views and the third-party views developed in the SDK. Secondly, by development, you can write your own custom processes, screens, and applications to interact with the existing business logic. You can tailor the existing VB screens, and we're working on tailoring the web screens. So this is both the Sage 300 core VB screens as well as the third-party VB screens. And you can tailor and extend the existing business logic. For example, add additional validations or additional security and additional functionality sitting on top of the existing business logic. And finally, you can create your own custom views, the tables and associated business logic, in such a way that the rest of the tools and utilities for Sage 300 see your custom views in the same way as a core view. For example, the reporting tools, the dump and load, the upgrade utilities, and so on. The benefits of using Extender and Python to do your customization is Python is an open source language which is widely used with thousands of well-tested libraries. The customizations you do are scripted and stored in the Sage 300 company database. This gives you flexibility inasmuch as the customizations can be deployed company by company and can be amended on site if you want. It's cost-effective because the customizations support the standard Sage 300 tools like Upgrade, Dump and Load, and the reporting tools. It gives you transparency as the source code is visible, and it facilitates site management. There's no need to compile the customizations version by version or product update by product update. The source code is backed up when you back up the company database, and it's self-documenting on site. Thank you for your time in reviewing this product demonstration video on Extender Developer. For more information on Extender and other Orchid products, please go to our website.